It's a humid Thursday here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Ijun in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Rival parties settle on the government reorganization bill that include various changes to current ministries and government offices. This year, things have turned around for Korea's currency following 3 years of losses against the greenback, despite lingering uncertainties in the global market. We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. Let's start things off with a check on how the markets fared here in Seoul today. We're now joined by Eunice Kim on the phone. So Eunice, it looks like Korean shares are continuing their strength forward.
Oh, yes, they are, June. Local shares extending their winning run, closing at a record high for the sixth straight session since surpassing that 2,400 mark last Thursday. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi was up 0.49%, finishing the day at 2,441.84, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also rose 0.74% to end at 676.51. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean won weakened 1125.51 against the greenback. After initially seesawing between gains and losses, the main bourse gained ground in afternoon trading to cross the 2,440 line as foreign investors and institutions switched to become net buyers. Also, Asian markets as a whole added to their rally today. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside of Japan gained by 0.1%, bringing it close to its peak reached back in December of 2007. The bullishness on the back of Wall Street's fierce rally. All three major indices, the Dow, S&P 500, and NASDAQ, had all set record closing highs on Wednesday local time. Notably, the S&P Tech Index, that's the index of America's more than 60 largest technology companies, replaced its record high, which is a milestone as the last record was hit 17 years earlier in March of 2000 before the implosion of the dot-com bubble. This has been Eunice Kim for Business Daily.
And finally, some progress at the National Assembly, with all four major political parties agreeing on a government restructuring bill. And our Shin Se-min tells us about some of the changes due to take place.
After a long delayed debate in Parliament, rival political parties settled on the government reorganization bill, a boost to President Moon's efforts to complete his administration. It's a progress made after days and weeks of wrangling amongst the rival parties on the government's proposal submitted in June. With the bill now in place, these are the expected changes to come. The Small and Medium Business Administration will be elevated to a ministerial level, supporting SMEs and venture startups. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy will have a newly launched Vice Ministerial Level Trade Negotiations Bureau. And the Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning will be given a new name, roughly translated to the Ministry of Science, Technology and ICT. It'll also have a Vice Ministerial Science Innovation Headquarters. As previously proposed, the Ministry of Public Safety and Security will now be dissolved, and the Coast Guard and the Fire Service currently under that ministry will become separate independent bodies. The Vice Ministerial Chief of the Patriots and Veterans Affairs Ministry will be boosted to a minister-level position, and the Presidential Security Office will be reformed into a vice ministerial group. But despite such progress, there is still more to be done. Lawmakers are still deliberating the government's multi-billion-dollar extra budget bill and have until August 2nd, the final day of the Assembly's July temporary session, to finalize the bill. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
President Moon Jae-in and his top aides are reviewing ways to implement his government's 100 policy agendas unveiled on Wednesday. In a meeting earlier today, the president and his team worked on details to execute their 5-year policy blueprint, with job creation topping the agenda. The administration also held its first Finance Strategy Council meeting, which will take place over 2 days. The council will lay the foundation of Moon's finance and budget policies, which include creating jobs, finding new growth engines, addressing low birth rates, and improving people's livelihoods. Some 220 budget officials from various government ministries, as well as members of the ruling Democratic Party, are attending the meeting. The government's new economic policies aims to spark a paradigm shift in the Korean economy, boosting jobs and income as well as innovation. That's according to Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon, who held his second economic meeting with other cabinet members on Thursday. Kim said the economy is still facing slow growth, income polarization, and other structural problems. He expressed hope that the meeting will clarify the new government's economic policy direction and also include discussions on the country's financial markets, industry, and welfare. The government will start converting non-regular jobs into full-time regular occupations, starting with the public sector. Here's what Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun had to say on the matter.
The government needs to effectively manage converting irregular workers into regular staff. We must also prepare for any negative impact the process could entail.
New Labor Ministry guidelines say irregular workers in 852 government agencies will have their statuses changed to regular employees. Around 310,000 non-regular employees who have been working in the public sector for more than 2 years will be eligible for a full-time contract. According to government data, the number of irregular workers, such as part-timer laborers and short-term contractors, stands at 6.3 million people. It also found their average wages were only around half of those earned by regular full-time workers. The forecast for Korea's electricity demand in the year 2030 fell 10% compared to the last projections released 2 years ago. The change could prompt the government to adjust its power generation plan. Here's our Elliot Kim with more.
A panel of energy experts have lowered their forecast for the country's electricity needs in the year 2030. The working group predicted the country's power demand to peak at 101.9 gigawatts, 10% lower than the 113.2 gigawatt demand forecasted just 2 years ago, the equivalent of electricity generated by 7 to 10 nuclear reactors. Every 2 years, the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy releases a 15-year plan to fulfill the country's present and future energy needs. Short, mid, and long-term forecasts are used by the ministry to decide on the construction of new power plants and manage the mix of various energy sources. The reduction in forecast is being attributed to a lower than expected economic growth rate, which is now seen at 2.5% from the 3.4% predicted by the working group 2 years ago. The revelations could result in a major shift to current plans calling for the necessity of 2 more nuclear reactors in 2028 and 2029 to cover expected demand. Some experts note that the projections do not reflect potential energy needs that may arise from the fourth industrial revolution, with industries like semiconductors and steel having high energy requirements. Power generation remains one of Korea's most controversial topics, as all options have divisive aspects. The potential shift from coal to LNG would bring significant price increases. There is opposition to phasing out nuclear power plants as well, which provide low-cost energy, since Korea has safely operated them for years and is less vulnerable to natural disasters compared to countries like Japan. Experts are also unsure if the country can rely on renewable energy due to an unfavorable natural environment for wind and solar power generation. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Now, back in spring, it was hard for many people here in the country to enjoy the nice weather outside because of the high density of fine dust in the air. And a recent study provided more insight into what might be causing such bad air quality here in Korea. Our Park Ki-jun has more.
People in Korea have long complained that China is to blame for the high concentration of fine dust in the country. But according to a joint study by the Korean government and NASA, half of it comes from Korea. The National Institute of Environmental Research of Korea and NASA on Wednesday announced the results of their research that was conducted between May and June last year. 52% of the fine dust in Korea was found to be emitted by local coal-fired power plants, factories, and automobiles. 2 major facilities were identified as the major sources of air pollution. One is the coal-fired power plant in Daean, Chungcheongnam-do province, and the other one is the Daesan Petrochemical Complex located in Seosan in the same province.
The nitrate levels are relatively higher in Chungcheongnam-do province, where metropolitan areas and power plants are concentrated.
Another large contributor of fine dust is China. The results show China is responsible for as much as 34% of the seasonal amount of fine dust. And some Koreans have filed lawsuits against the Chinese government for the physical and mental damage caused by the dust.
The other thing that benefits this time period is that we wanted to emphasize the local influences on pollution.
Because Korea's air quality is largely affected by seasonal factors and year-to-year meteorological differences, experts say further observation is needed. Last month, the Korean government unveiled a list of measures to improve the country's air quality. The government aims to reduce the average fine dust concentration from 23 to 18 micrograms per cubic meter of air by 2026. Park Hee-jun, Business Daily.
The Korean won is now Asia's top-performing currency, with some even calling it missile-proof. Let's find out how this came about.
Korea's currency appreciated 7.5% against the US dollar in the first half of this year, up 3% from its 2016 high. This despite an interest rate hike by the US Federal Reserve and North Korea's launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile earlier this month. Experts say President Moon Jae-in's pledge to reduce the chaebol's influence over the economy and distribute wealth more evenly has spurred foreign investor interest, making the Korean won the top-performing currency in Asia. This also comes as net purchases of Korean stocks and bonds reached $4.6 billion so far in July, reversing the outflows seen earlier this month. So what does this mean for the Korean economy, and will the won continue to be missile-proof?
And to tell us more about this, Professor Kim Se-won from Ewha Women's University joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so now for the past 3 years, the Korean won saw losses against the US dollar, and obviously the beginning of this year didn't look that promising either, with the US Fed rate hike as well as geopolitical risks stemming from North Korea. Now, what were some of the reasons for the won's retreat prior to this year?
Well, actually, for the last 3 years, Korean won was depreciated over about 10%, and that gave a great support to the 5-year straight trade surplus of the Korean economy. Meanwhile, other currencies had different directions. Actually, our competing countries' currencies like yuan was depreciated over 11%.
Wow.
But Japanese yen and euro was even appreciated over 6%.
And now, just past the halfway point of 2017, the Korean won is up against the greenback and is Asia's top-performing currency. Now, what's the reason behind this?
Well, actually, there are two major reasons behind the strong won. The first is continuous trade surplus, and that is more fundamentally related to recovering global economy and its positive impact on Korean economy's export. And the second is a booming Korean financial market in both of the bonds and stock market. And in addition to Korean economy's surplus, the appreciation of the Korean won is more fostered by Korean stock market booms.
And like we heard in the report, some experts are even saying that the Korean won is missile-proof, saying that it was hardly affected by North Korea's recent missile launch as well as U.S. Fed rate hikes. So what do you think makes the Korean won so resilient?
Well, another view about the missile-proof Korean won is foreign investors became immune to North Korea's military threats with long-range missiles and nuclear bomb tests. And actually, the money sense is really simple for foreign investors. About $500 billion of foreign money is invested in Korean stock market, and most of them are from United States investors. So they believe that, particularly American investors believe that Mr. Trump won't let their military to attack the North Korea. And secondly, North Korea is one of the lowest income countries in the world, so they do not have economic power to attack the neighbor countries. So because of these very simple reasons, foreign investors feel pretty safe with Korean financial market.
Now at this point, we're wondering, how does the won's performance compare to that of other national currencies?
Actually, in the first quarter of this year, Korean won was appreciated over 7%. But from second quarter of this year, Korean won is depreciating a little bit. In the same period, actually, the other major Asian countries' currencies are broadly appreciating together. Like Japanese yen and Chinese yuan together appreciated over 2%. And Taiwanese dollar was even further appreciated over 6%. These all faster driven by strong Asian market stock booms. From the beginning of this year, over $30 billion of money was newly injected to Asian stock markets.
But then what are some of the negative side effects from the won strengthening against the US dollar? I mean, how would this all affect Korean exporters?
As we talked about, as Korean trade surplus is continuing, it is true that Korean won should be appreciating in the long run. However, the problem is there's not much room for Korean government to do something about it because U.S. government is watching closely related to a currency manipulating list, which will be released on the next year's April. So I think Korean government will let the Korean currency will be appreciated further.
Now, how long do you think this will last then? I mean, do you think the won will continue to be missile-proof?
Well, market participants are expecting that the strong Korean won, strong Korean bonds market, and lastly, Korean stock market will be continued by the end of this year at least. But depending on US Fed interest rate hikes by around the end of this year, and also depending on whether South Korea is included on the list of the currency manipulating country, which is due on next April 28th. So then around the early next year, the direction of the Korean won value will be determined again.
All right, so we'll definitely keep our eyes on those. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
The U.S. and China have failed to reach any agreements on their trade issues at the annual economic dialogue session between the two countries. At its conclusion, the usual press conference was canceled, and they didn't issue any joint statement. Reuters cited a senior U.S. official who said the two sides had a frank exchange, but no agreements were reached on such issues as trade imbalance, steel, and access to China's financial services market. This is a further blow to Washington's relationship with Beijing after their 100-day economic plan launched by Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping back in April yielded no tangible outcome. The Trump administration has also become increasingly frustrated at China's lack of action to rein in North Korea. Imported U.S. beef will face tougher inspections from the Korean government after a case of mad cow disease was detected in the U.S. state of Alabama this week. Seoul's Agriculture Ministry held a meeting on Wednesday where they decided to expand the sampling and inspection of imported American beef from the current 3% to 30% all inbound shipments. The U.S. Department of Agriculture said on Wednesday that an 11-year-old cow in Alabama had tested positive for mad cow disease. This is the first time the disease has been detected in the U.S. since 2012. Next year's Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games is now only 200 days away. Korea is determined to hold a successful Olympics after failing twice in previous attempts to host the Games. Now, in support of the Games, the government is investing over $6 billion in transportation, infrastructure, and the local tourism industry. So with just 7 months to go, we take a look at the preparations that are underway.
The Olympic Games are a world-renowned global festival. In February 2018, Korea will be hosting the Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games in Pyeongchang, Gangwon-do Province. Korea is only the second country in Asia to host the Winter Games and also the 8th country to host both the Summer and Winter Olympics. With just 200 days to go, the official store of the Winter Olympic Games opened its doors 2 months ago. With the countdown in full swing, many people are taking interest in the official mascot and other related products.
I think these mascots like Suorang and Pandabi are very cute. I believe they'll get more people interested in the Winter Games.
We get a daily average of 100 customers, with many of them being foreigners. With the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics fast approaching, many local residents and foreign tourists are expected to purchase more Olympic licensed products.
Expectations of the Winter Olympic Games are running high in the country, not only because it's a golden opportunity to promote Pyeongchang and Gangwon-do province as winter tourism destinations, but also because it could provide a much-needed boost to Korea's sluggish economy. The Winter Olympics is expected to generate an economic output of over $57 billion and create some 230,000 jobs. The new Dongsa Expressway opened at the end of last month, which connects the capital Seoul to Yangyang. It cuts travel time from Seoul to the country's eastern coast to just 90 minutes. Its goal is to make Gangwon-do province more accessible to visitors from both home and abroad.
You can now reach Yangyang from Incheon International Airport in just 2 hours and 20 minutes. This is one of many efforts to ensure success of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games next February.
A new high-speed rail network connecting Seoul and Gangneung is also in the works, due to open at the end of this year. With that, Gangwon-do province hopes to make itself more accessible to daily commuters.
Thanks to the Winter Olympics, various infrastructure like railways and expressways are being expanded. It will be much easier for visitors to access the region, and we are expecting an increase in global awareness of the province.
이거는 썰매 종목인데요. 썰매 종목은 크게 3개가 있어요. 봅슬레이, 로지, 스켈레톤. 맞아요. 스켈레톤. 이런 데 볼 것 같아요.
This promotion zone opened in January last year to help the public better understand the concept of the Winter Olympics. So far, more than 100,000 visitors have come here, becoming one of the most popular tourist hotspots in Gangwon-do province.
Before coming here, I didn't know much about the Winter Olympics. I'm glad to have learned about more than 5 winter sporting events, and I'm excited about the Games.
So far, we've received about 14,000 visitors from within the country. After the Olympics, it will turn into a memorial hall to preserve the memory of the event and provide space to hold new leisure sporting events.
Visitors are also able to enjoy a 4D experience of ski jumps and bobsleigh events. These VR equipment offer a more realistic Winter Olympic experience.
It feels very realistic. I got on the ski jump of my choice and it felt like the real thing. I'm excited to see how this technology will be utilized at the Winter Olympics.
One of the biggest highlights of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics is the use of ICT technology, which comes at a time when the country is pursuing its so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution. Smartphones with built-in AR technology can help foreign visitors in Pyeongchang navigate their way around. Bobsleigh athletes will be racing down with micro cameras attached to their sleds to give viewers a more realistic feeling of the sport thanks to the combined ICT technology.
Gangwon-do province is making preparations in a variety of sectors to boost the local economy ahead of the Winter Olympic Games, including accommodations, sightseeing, and transportation. We hope our province will become an international tourist hotspot through its Olympic legacy.
In an effort to sustain the economic benefits, Gangwon-do province plans to create a Winter Olympic special zone by the end of this year. 10 districts will be designated as special zones in Pyeongchang, Gangneung, and Cheongsan, with sightseeing activities and entertainment for local and foreign tourists. But for many host countries, the post-Olympic hangover has not been pretty. In the case of Japan's Winter Olympics in Nagano, the city failed to utilize venues that cost huge amounts of investment, and the local economy became stagnant.
Maintaining one stadium could cost between $2.5 to $9 million a year. Without financial support, this could be devastating for small and mid-sized cities. Therefore, the central government not only needs to put up a safety net, but the local government also needs to promote sport tourism packages and cultural events.
All eyes are now on the upcoming 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. Many are hopeful that the event will bring significant economic benefits through various government support measures and infrastructure investments.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.